Hey amigas, are you interested in knowing how I run this podcast and what tools I use to run English Made Simple podcast? Simply go to englishmadesimple.net/tools, TOOLS, to see what type of microphone I use, what type of equipment I use, and also what type of camera I use as well here at English Made Simple. That was englishmadesimple.net/tools. That's a new page that I've just put together for you, and you can check it out over there. And you are listening to English Made Simple. This is episode number 234, number 234, número 234. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the show. You're in the right place, amigos y amigas. This is the place where I help you become fluent in English, one short conversation at a time. So, this is episode number 234, and my name is Milena, and I'm the host of the English Made Simple show. You can find me at englishmadesimple.net, englishmadesimple.net. That's where I live. That's my home. Alright guys, today we won't have the repeat after me segment. There won't be any phrases for you to repeat. It's going to be a little bit different today. So for today's episode, I'd like to ask you a simple question. Just a simple question. Do you feel anxious or embarrassed when speaking in English? Is there a difference between these two? Feeling anxious or embarrassed? And I'm not talking about feeling shy. I'm just talking about these feelings of anxiety or embarrassment. Embarrassed when you're making mistakes, for example. So, is there a difference between feeling anxious or embarrassed? I think there is, okay? What do you think? As I've discovered quite recently, there is a difference in feeling anxious as opposed to feeling embarrassed. And I'm going to explain to you more about this difference with a short story. So I'm going to begin with a short story, my personal story, of course, why I think there is a difference in feeling anxious or embarrassed when speaking another language, okay? Now, I don't know if you know this, but it's been 3 years since I last spoke in Spanish, consistently, I should say. For example, every day. I don't speak Spanish every day. I used to when I was in Chile, when I lived in Chile. As you know, I am married to a Chileno. My husband is from South America, more specifically from Chile. It's hard for me to understand Chilean sometimes, so we don't practice Spanish at home because of that, because it's hard to understand. I know the official language of Chile is Spanish, but I don't call it that. I call it Chilean, okay, because it's a special language. Chileans have their own dialect and their own slang compared to the rest of South America. I remember my very first time trying to speak in Spanish when I lived in Chile. My very first time, I was really petrified. I was petrified. You could say I was frozen with fear. I couldn't order a cup of coffee, for example, and I think I mentioned this in one of my earlier episodes. If you had time to listen to like episodes 1 or 2 in the beginning, I think I mentioned this experience there as well. So I couldn't even order a cup of coffee. That's how scared I was. I had to rely on my husband to order food for me or a cup of coffee, which kind of sucks, right? Now, whenever the time came for me to place my order, let's say I was in a restaurant or a cafe, whenever it was my time to place the order, so I felt a little bit anxious. I felt a little bit of an anxiety coming on. And how did I know those were the feelings of anxiousness? I'm going to call it that, of anxiety. How did I know those were the feelings I was feeling? How did I know it was that and not something else? Well, my heart started to beat faster every time I wanted to say something. I had shortness of breath. I was making short and fast breaths, tightness in my throat. I felt tight in my chest and muscles overall. I had butterflies in my stomach, as they say. It's an expression, by the way, butterflies in one's stomach. Let me quickly tell you about this expression. So when you have butterflies in your stomach, it would mean that you're feeling nervous about something. Imagine going to sit an exam, for example. Let's say you're going to sit IELTS or TOEFL exam. You'd start to feel anxious just by, taking the exam or just before taking the exam. You get that funny feeling in your stomach. We call that butterflies in your stomach, all right? All right, well, I am getting distracted now. Back to my story. So the feelings of anxiety I had, well, they didn't last long. These symptoms that I just described, they didn't last long. This would last perhaps 10 seconds or less, not that long. However, I was quite aware of my whole body during these 10 seconds. Put simply, I just wasn't relaxed and comfortable with speaking in another language. I really didn't feel comfortable. It was completely out of my comfort zone. So I did a quick online research and found an article from a psychology blog, believe it or not. A psychology blog called 4 Things Not to Do When You Feel Anxious. And I would like to quote something from this article because that really explains this feeling of anxiety and why we as humans feel this. Why do we have these types of feelings? Okay, so this is what they said. Anxiety is a signal that you need to pay attention to something that your brain thinks is important to your survival. Fear and anxiety are wired-in responses of your brain and body that have their roots in the history of our species. Our ancestors faced dangerous predators and other dangers. Those who reacted more quickly to get away were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. So this quote, or this scenario that was in the quote, is quite understandable. Like if you think about the ancient times and, in prehistoric times, we had beasts and dangerous animals chasing us in the wild. So of course we had to feel that anxiety or something that will propel us to run away. But nowadays we don't have beasts and dangerous animals chasing us, but we still react the same way when we are, facing these feelings of anxiety and we are about to do an exam, for example. We still have those same feelings that kick in and make us feel anxious. And this is just something that was built into us. That's what they are saying here from this quote. It's something that we have to live with, we are born with. So whether you're doing an exam or speaking in another language or trying to converse in another language that's not your native language, of course you will start to feel a little bit anxious. The same feelings of anxiousness, I should say, you start to feel. So that was me 4 years ago, right? That was me about 4 years ago. I was frozen and I couldn't speak Spanish. Well, just wasn't confident enough to speak it. And I was unable to order a cup of coffee in Spanish. But I wasn't chased by dangerous animals. No. I just wasn't able to order a cup of coffee. A completely different scenario. Now, what happened after that? How did I overcome this anxiety, this feeling of anxiety, this shortness of breath and feeling scared? Well, it's quite simple. I finally had to just face my fears and just do it, go with it. Even if I made mistakes, I had to learn from my mistakes, obviously. Otherwise, I would never be able to speak in Spanish. So that was then, all right? That was me then. Now, let's fast forward to today. Present time. I've survived speaking in Spanish. I overcame my initial fear of trying to speak in another language. I have confidence now. To make mistakes, but also to correct my mistakes. And if there's anything I didn't understand, I have confidence to ask for clarification. All because I just had to do it, and I had to practice, and I had to just do it. Just start speaking. It's really the ultimate goal, I guess, where you'd like to be with your English as well. You'd like to not have that fear, not feel anxious or embarrassed, but feel more confident and be able to manage that fear that you feel when you're speaking in English, okay? Because that's gonna go away. It's only temporary. All you have to do is just speak. So yes, I still make mistakes, okay, when I speak Spanish. And yes, I don't feel anxious anymore. But now I feel embarrassed when I make stupid mistakes, okay? Like really minor mistakes. Something that I should have known, all right? Something really minor because I haven't practiced for a long time. So that feeling doesn't last long. That feeling of, feeling embarrassed. It doesn't last long. So when I do make a mistake, I am quite confident in correcting myself. And if I didn't understand anything, I would just ask for clarification. And that's really important if you are confident in asking someone, am I saying this correctly? Is this how you say this word? So being able to say that actually saves you from that embarrassment. It does save you. It makes you sound more fluent, okay? So the only way to progress in English is to know that it is okay to make mistakes from time to time. It's not the end of the world, amigos y amigas. It really is not end of the world. These things can be fixed. You can easily fix your mistakes by being able to ask for clarification if there was something that you didn't understand, right? And now over to you, amigos y amigas. Hopefully I was clear. I'm gonna ask you the same question now. Do you feel anxious or embarrassed when speaking in English? Now, if you haven't realized from that story I've just shared with you today, I was only feeling anxious and scared and fearful, I guess, at the early stages of learning a language or learning Spanish. So I didn't have enough vocabulary, so I couldn't really use the phrases to try different phrases, to order food, for example. So the only reason I was feeling anxious is because I had limited vocabulary and I couldn't express myself. But then afterwards, when I did start to feel confident, I started to feel embarrassed. So that's a different stage of my language learning, okay? There was a different stage. I don't feel anxious anymore, but I do feel embarrassed when I make mistakes. The important thing to know is that you need to be able to fix those mistakes that you make. Now, I am quite aware when I make a mistake, and I always try to correct myself when I speak in Spanish. Now, are you able to do that in English for yourself? Are you able to do that for yourself? That's my question. I will let you think about that question, where you're at in your English learning journey. Are you feeling anxious or are you feeling embarrassed? So I believe that the feelings would depend on where in your English journey you are at present. If you are right at the start of your journey, where all you do is read and listen in English and rarely speak, you might feel anxious when it's time to speak in English. However, if you've been speaking in English for a while but still find yourself feeling embarrassed when pronouncing certain words, for example, but you don't feel embarrassed to admit to yourself that you made a mistake and find a way to correct it, then you are well on your way to speaking English fluently. Does this all make sense, amigos y amigas? Great! I'm glad to know that something is making sense today. Alright, I've got a few things to add before we wrap up today's show. Amigos, if you'd like to keep track of episodes via email, go to englishmadesimple.net, the homepage, and then scroll all the way down and enter your email and your name, and you'll start receiving emails about recent episodes. Also, don't forget to go to englishmadesimple.net/convo to get your audiobook and get access to the 3-day mini email course. Also, don't forget to join the challenge. You'll get invited to join after you complete the mini course. Again, that link was englishmadesimple.net/convo to get the audiobook. Thanks for joining me today, amigos y amigas. You've been an amazing audience. You've survived today's episode. That's good. And you've been jamming with me, Lena from English Made Simple. Until next time, hasta la próxima.